In 2019, Sega revealed the Genesis Mini to eager fans worldwide. It had over 40 titles, a few of which were never officially released before. You could even play third-party favorites like Street Fighter II, Castlevania, and Contra. It was also released in familiar packaging and under the proper name for each and every region. You could change many of the ROMs to their Japanese variants. Needless to say, it was a fine product that many people were more than happy with. For $80, it seemed like Sega had a system on the market again, and I think they did an overall excellent job with the build quality and the software lineup. Roughly a year later, Sega released the Game Gear Mini, having yet another chance to strike retro gold. As we all know, the Game Gear has an excellent library of great games, and the prospect of having them on the go on a modern LCD was extremely exciting. Alas, Sega approached this product as a novelty and used the gimmick of its tiny size as a selling point. The thing is, it was comically small. It had a ridiculous and almost completely useless 1-inch screen, and instead of filling it with many great games, they spread out only a few offerings over different colored variants. This was clearly not a serious effort to commemorate the platform, but instead a cheap toy meant to be seen as a collectible. Perhaps most disappointing of all, Sega had completely ignored the chance to release a Master System Mini. With hundreds of titles under its belt, Sega's 8-bit powerhouse was loaded with memorable titles, many of which have no modern way to play them officially. That leaves me wondering, what would I want to see in a Master System Mini? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I've chosen 40 titles plus 2 bonus games for a Sega Master System Mini. I've tried to stay realistic with my picks, but stuck to things I really wanted to see. There's a ton to go over, so let's get started. You know this is gonna be there. Sega owns it and it's unlike any other version available. Afterburner wasn't anywhere near its arcade cousin, but I enjoyed it enough back in the day. It's still forward-scrolling, still really hard, and was Sega's first 4-mega powered cartridge. Alex Kidd was a big part of the Master System experience for many of you. This little dude was as big as Mario in some countries, and his adventure is an important piece of the platform's history. Classic visuals, memorable tunes, and plenty of challenges await newcomers. Not including this would likely cause death threats to Sega of Europe. You're gonna see a few puzzle titles on the Master System Mini, and I think Baku Baku Animal is a great choice. Line up the proper food for each animal to clear the screen. It's simple yet addictive fun that holds up really well in its 8-bit incarnation. Good old Black Belt. This was a reskinned Fist of the North Star done for Western markets. It has side-scrolling action segments that lead into one-on-one fights. Among the classics for this machine, it reigns as one of the most beloved. It also happens to look and sound great and would be an excellent addition to this lineup. The 2-player run-and-gun classic Gain Ground really needs to be here. You must fight your way across multiple battlefields, getting both yourself and your team across to the finish line. I love pretty much every version of this. It's so simple to jump into and enjoy. It may look tame, but I guarantee hours of great gameplay if you just give it a chance. Sega would need to corral the Disney license, but Castle of Illusion is a must-have. It was different from the 16-bit version and every bit as playable. I love the sound and visuals and can replay this for hours. Sega really knew how to make the most of the Disney license, and this here is one of their best Master System releases. Sega's adaptation of Choplifter was a winner. It's challenging, looks great, and is one of the better interpretations of the license. Rescue hostages and get them back to safety. It sounds easy, but the enemy isn't going to make things a cakewalk. They've got tanks, jets, and all sorts of artillery to bring you down. It's definitely a classic. Like Castle of Illusion, Deep Duck Trouble was another excellent platforming adventure. This time it's Donald Duck you must control in an effort to save his Uncle Scrooge McDuck. Absolutely beautiful visuals that really take advantage of the Master System colors. Is it as good as Castle of Illusion? I'll leave that up to you, but it deserves to be here all the same. I was a big fan of Zelda growing up. I loved the exploration and discovery, which made the first NES outing one of my favorite games ever. Sega took that formula and added their Golden Axe license to it, creating the magical Golden Axe Warrior. Here you explore, find items, kill bad guys, and discover a world that just oozes replayability. In some ways, it's a better game than the Nintendo Classic, and a perfect fit for the Master System Mini. During Sega's 8-bit run, Konami wasn't interested in making a Castlevania for them, so they made one themselves. Master of Darkness takes many of the staples from that classic series and makes it its own. Shockingly, it worked, and this ended up being one heck of a solid effort. Cool locations, nice music, and a feel that definitely pays tribute to its source material. Master of Darkness is an adventure all of you need to take. Many of you may have not played Ninja Gaiden on the Master System. It has lived in the shadow of its more popular NES cousin for years, and it's high time that comes to an end. This version of the game plays differently, but is still an epic adventure. You get great visuals and some truly fun ninja action. Give it a chance, and you'll come away with a newfound appreciation for what Sega accomplished here. Outrun was a classic that I loved. While this version was cut back heavily, I still enjoyed the classic tunes and the solid gameplay. It's the first home version I ever played, and that right there makes it a nostalgia bomb. Trying to get to the end was a challenge me and my friends spent many hours with, and I couldn't imagine a Master System Mini without it. At a time when RPGs weren't on my radar at all, there was Phantasy Star. I was enthralled with its world and characters. I was no good with these games back then, but I still played what I could. Years later, I finally beat it, giving me full appreciation of just how good this actually was for its time. It's got a hell of a difficulty barrier in the beginning, but once you understand what you need, you'll get lost in the magic of this sprawling adventure. There's a lot of folks out there that hate on pro wrestling. They say it's overly simple. They say it's light on content. They say there's not enough moves. But man, is it so much fun. I love the cutesy graphics, and slapping on a finisher in the middle of the ring is crazy fun. There are better games to be sure, but pro wrestling is good, clean, easy to pick up fun that can be played with your family and friends. R-Type on the Master System was a top-notch arcade translation. I mean, for the gap in technology, it did a superb job recreating that original experience. And as far as shoot-'em-ups go on the Master System, you'll be hard-pressed to find it superior. Back in the 8-bit days, you had a few choices to play Rampage on a home console, but it was the Master System version that reigned supreme. 2 players, great sound and visuals, and a fantastic FM soundtrack rounded out this to be my preferred way to play, even more so than the original arcade. For me, there was only one place to play Taito's Roston at home, and that was on the Master System. This arcade port basically had you playing a Conan-style action platformer full of enemies and environmental dangers. It was extremely tough, but the world and music really kept you playing. There are, of course, better ways to play the original arcade version today, but as far as Master System classics, it belongs here as much as anything else from Sega. I loved Road Rash on the Genesis, and I am still gobsmacked at how well it turned out on the Master System. I mean, it's a bit slower, but dude, look at that! That's a freaking 8-bit console pulling that off. It even manages to capture the music fairly well. You gotta have at least one racing game here, and this is good stuff all the way around. Shinobi is a Sega classic that was synonymous with the Master System. This arcade port took a number of liberties with that source, but was ultimately better off for it. This was one of my most played games, and it absolutely pisses on the NES edition. To have a Master System Mini without Shinobi is to make the world weep with sorrow. Sonic was huge on the Genesis, but he was also quite popular on the Master System. There are many that even prefer this release. It's not a port of its 16-bit cousin, and instead is an entirely different adventure. Different stages, different bosses, and gameplay that holds up pretty well. Sega loves Sonic, so expect a number of them to be included. Like the first, Sonic 2 on the Master System was a different game from the Genesis release. That alone makes it worth a look, and it too is pretty fun. It was developed by Aspect, who also helped create Super Tempo for the Sega Saturn. Sonic Chaos is one that you may not have played on the Master System. Known mainly as a Game Gear title, this was released in PAL territories and Brazil for the Master System as well. It too was developed by Aspect and had a number of cool features. Tails is playable here and plays differently from Sonic, giving you 2 unique game styles. I thought it was pretty good. Primarily remembered as a Genesis title, Streets of Rage also came to the Master System. It doesn't play quite the same, but for an 8-bit brawler, it more than gets the job done. I think this one would be a nice addition so the genre gets some representation on the Mini. It's also one heck of a nice looking game. Part 2 didn't get quite the makeover the 16-bit version received, but it still plays well enough to earn a spot here. It doesn't have the super moves of the Game Gear, and in many ways doesn't look as nice as the first, but more Streets of Rage is never a bad thing, especially with the genre so weak otherwise. Super Off-Road was a great arcade game, and I think it would be nice to have it here. The Master System release was 2 players and looked the part. There are a bunch of tracks, and racing the tiny trucks around the screen never gets old. This was originally only released in Europe, so it'll give the rest of us a chance to own it on the old Master System. The Wonder Boy games really were popular on the Master System, and I expect a number of them to appear on the Mini. The original was an auto-scrolling platformer based on an arcade game, and it turned out pretty good. I actually preferred this to the Alex Kidd titles and feel it would be a wonderful addition here. Wonder Boy in Monsterland was kind of a mini-action RPG. It's still side-scrolling with lots of jumping, but introduces item shops, magic, and puzzles to solve. It gets overlooked a lot because of the tame presentation, but it's actually quite a good game. It's a pretty radical departure from what we saw in the first, and set the stage for even more changes in future releases. Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap was a direct sequel to Monsterland, and mainly focuses on platforming and lots of exploration. Many consider it one of the better games for the Master System, so I figured it's gotta be included. Wonder Boy and Monster World took much of the changes found in the previous 2 games and gave it a huge visual overhaul. This is point blank one of the prettiest Master System games I've ever seen. Kill enemies, collect gold, buy items, and conquer the various areas of this vast world. There's still lots of platforming and RPG elements, making this another standout release for the Master System. East: The Vanished Omens was an RPG by Falcom originally. It was ported to the Master System by Sega in 1988. I first played this on the TurboGrafx CD a few years later, and didn't get to this particular version until sometime after that. It's a great game though, and full of things to see and do. It plays quite differently from Phantasy Star, but is still just as compelling. Zillion was an interesting game on the Master System. It was basically a run-and-gun adventure based on a Japanese anime. Aside from shooting down enemies, you also have to find keycards and passcodes to finish the areas. It's actually a fun game once you get used to it, and there aren't many games like it for the platform. Sega hasn't done much with the franchise since the 8-bit days, so this is a fine time to give it some attention. Zillion also had a sequel called Triformation. Securing the license for one would mean the second should be a shoo-in. This one is much more action-oriented and has improved visuals. It's a tough one, but a good time. Ultima 4 feels really strange when you first start, but it's actually a pretty deep RPG with lots to discover. It's incredibly different from the other RPGs on the Master System, and I think it'd be an excellent addition. Sega actually handled the porting duties here, and you don't need experience with any of the other games to play it. I was always blown away by Thunderblade. Whether it was arcade or home, I really enjoyed the visuals. You get top-down and forward-scrolling stages that look pretty special for an 8-bit title. It's tough too, with a relentless onslaught of enemies bearing down on you. At a time when shoot-'em-ups all looked and played the same, Sega made something quite a bit different. I'm not a huge fan of the Master System Space Harrier, but I figure it needs to be here. These types of games were staples at the time for the platform, and no doubt many of you have fond memories of it. Spellcaster here was a reskin of the Japanese Peacock King, a side-scrolling action-adventure game that also served as the previous entry to Mystic Defender on the Genesis. You see a lot of similarities between these titles, and this one is definitely worth a look. I appreciated its presentation as well as its unique adventure elements. There's not a lot like it on the Master System. Part Sonic, part pinball game, I think Sega releases this one for sure. It's not the same as the Genesis version, which gives it even more clout. I think it's a good compromise instead of adding columns or Woody Pop. I'm not sure Sega is willing to pay for the Rambo license, so let's call this one Secret Command. This was an overhead run-and-gun shooter that had two-player co-op. You need to rescue POWs and take down the bad guys. You get access to Rambo's famous explosive arrows and a challenge that should keep you coming back for more. I'm no fan of Psycho Fox, but it needs to be here. It was exceptionally popular in many countries where the Master System sold well. Vic Tokai developed it, who went on to do the mechanically similar Decap Attack. It does have some decent visuals and tunes, and is a good alternative to the Sonic titles. Penguin Land is an underrated gem on the Master System. Here you must get your egg to the bottom of the screen. Sounds easy, but if it falls too far, splat. There are also enemies just jonesing for a chance to smash your unborn prodigy. It takes some real strategy to see this game through to its conclusion. It has over 24 challenging stages that have nearly infinite replay value. Like the Genesis Mini, I'd love to see a couple of bonus games added to this lineup. Tails Adventure was originally a Game Gear exclusive that I'd love to see get a bigger release here. Perhaps an expanded play area with an uptick in resolution. It was a really fine game and I don't think many folks ever got a chance to play it. I'd also like to see the same for GG Shinobi. This was a killer action game that is just begging for another chance to shine. Again, a resolution increase could really open up these stages and give gamers a chance to experience one of the best entries in the entire series. I recently did a video about a possible Sega Master System Mini. I added 42 games to this device, all of which I felt would be killer additions. I really did try and remain realistic in my approach. I felt Sega would avoid a ton of licensed content, so most anything they didn't outright own or have easy access to was left off the list. I also didn't feel Sega would load the device down with lots of repeats of the same genre. As much as I may think shoot-'em-ups deserve some attention, I think Sega would see their own stuff like Thunderblade, Space Harrier, and Afterburner as plenty of representation. Of course, many of you had your own choices that you'd add to the Sega Master System Mini, and you expressed how important they were to your experience with the platform. This has motivated me to make sure they get a voice, so on the off chance that Sega is listening, they have a shot. I went through hundreds of comments, pulled the most often requested editions to my list, and made a video just for you guys. In this episode, we will take a look at even more games that should be on the Sega Master System Mini. I have over 20 editions, so let's get started. (1987's Kung Fu Kid was a Sega-developed beat-em-up that was sort of an expanded take on the original Kung Fu Master. It's a sequel to the SG-1000 title Dragon Wang, and is a revenge tale in which you are after the people that killed your master. The visuals here are nice and colorful, it plays well enough, and I gotta agree with you guys, this would be an easy and great addition to a Sega Master System Mini. While I still would prefer Streets of Rage, Kung Fu Kid has an entirely different feel and pacing that sets it apart. It also has 7 stages and a decent challenge, so I would not begrudge this being there at all. Because I always associated Dragon Crystal with its Game Gear release, I didn't really consider it for the Sega Master System Mini. This is an adventure game where you explore stages, collect items, kill enemies, and do your best to stay alive. The gameplay is a combination of real-time and turn-based movement, and it does take some getting used to. At first, death finds you really easily, and you'll need to learn what does what to get the most out of it. The levels are maze-like with darkened out paths that you must uncover. Find the goal and move on to the next stage. Each new game randomly changes the layouts, so no 2 games are ever the same. Would this go well with the Master System Mini? Sega owns it, and I see no reason why it shouldn't be there. Aerial Assault is a horizontal shoot-'em-up that comes off as fairly simple at first, but it's actually pretty solid. There are some really nice effects here at times, it's challenging, and it's a pretty fun time. The only thing that really holds it back is the lack of stages. At only 5 levels, it doesn't have a load of variety. Sega does own this, however, so it'd be easy to include. For those curious, this is not the exact same thing as what showed up on the Game Gear, so it is a true Master System exclusive. I was actually kinda surprised so many of you wanted to see Enduro Racer included. While named after an awesome arcade game, the Master System port was nothing like that. This is an isometric racing game that isn't bad, but isn't what I'd call a must-have. I'd take Road Rash instead of this any day of the week. But I do admit, with Sega owning this, we are far more likely to see it on the Master System Mini. If Sega does include it, hopefully we get the much better Japanese release that has twice as many stages. One thing I considered when doing the first episode was that I didn't feel Sega would include multiple games of similar themes outside of titles like Sonic. So with me having the original Alex Kidd and Shinobi games, I just didn't think Sega would include Alex Kidd in Shinobi World. Many of you seemed really disappointed in this thinking, and you clearly felt it should be included. I fully admit that this is an excellent 8-bit release, and I would love to see it on the Master System Mini, should it ever exist. This had the best gameplay of the Alex Kidd titles to me, and the sound and visuals were outstanding. This is one I would gladly admit I was wrong if it happened. The Sega Master System received 3 games based on the Asterix IP, and honestly, they were staples of the library outside of North America. All 3 are worth playing, having very nice graphics, and even the weakest of the bunch is still better than a lot of other games released at the time. Many of you consider it a must, and I can't fault you for that. These are all solid picks, and Sega owns the games themselves. The only hiccup is that they do not own the actual Asterix license, so I'm not sure these have a real shot at being included. I think Sega would want to keep the licensing costs way down, and Asterix just doesn't have the worldwide draw to warrant the investment. I want them all, but just don't think Sega would pay for them. I can't say I was surprised to see the love for the Ninja. This Sega-developed run-and-gun is based on the arcade Ninja Princess. We get a new lead, new stage layouts, new enemies, and some new music. This is quite a different game in the end, but I must admit, overlooking this classic was a mistake. While I used to suck at it for a long time, recent years has seen me get quite good at it and see it in an entirely new light. This is an excellent title that Sega owns outright, and I must say, it really needs to be on the Master System Mini. It's an early release that stayed true to its roots and remains insanely fun all these years later. It even supports 2 players. There are many of you that have fond memories of Considine. It's an action game where you must guide your samurai Hayato in his quest to recapture the stolen scrolls and Dragon King's sword. Your enemies are many and include spiders, skeletons, warlocks, and a ton of other things that appear out of thin air. While I admit that I think this is a good game, I can't say it's something I have to have. Some stages have that one-hit reset and repeat mechanic that really hurts it for me. I just don't want to replay the same area to the point of tedium. I know some of you consider that kind of challenge appealing, but Considine's gameplay isn't strong enough to command that type of respect from me. Sega owns it though, and it did have FM sound support, so including it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I was really fond of the Master System Double Dragon. It played differently from the arcade, and my friend and I dumped many hours into it to see the ending. Lots of comments wanted Double Dragon to be included, but I just don't think Sega would pursue the license, particularly since they have their own franchise in Streets of Rage. Still, this is certainly a classic version, and the 2-player mode set it apart back then. Great graphics and an awesome soundtrack that supports the FM module would make it an excellent addition. I don't think Sega would get it, but if they do, I'd certainly approve. Like Golden Axe Warrior, Golvelius is a Zelda-like adventure that has you exploring, finding items, and killing enemies. There are many hints scattered around its world to help you understand what you need to do and where you need to go. Collecting money lets you buy the things you need. My biggest issue with this were the respawning enemies. In the beginning it makes navigation tough, and I just never took to the exhaustive nature of the combat. To put it bluntly, I much preferred Golden Axe Warrior. I can't beat it up too much though. The gameplay variety is nice with both auto-scrolling areas and side-scrolling stages in addition to the Go Anywhere overworld. Contrary to popular belief, this did not originate on the Master System and first appeared on the MSX computer in Japan, where it even got a sequel. It was developed and published by Compile there, which means Sega would need to license this. Not sure that would happen, especially with their own RPG and adventure games sitting there for free. The Golvelius situation also applies to Miracle Warriors. Sega developed and published the Master System release, but it originated elsewhere and is owned by another company. This is one of those adventures that plays completely different from the other JRPGs of the era. You move your character around via a mini-map and interact with towns, NPCs, and enemies in a larger window. This one is tough to get into at first. Death comes easy and you need to learn where to go and how to deal with the nasty inhabitants of the land. It's a good game though, and can be a heck of a good time once you understand it. Again, I just don't think Sega will go after many games that need a license, but should it be there, I know a lot of folks will be very happy. A lot of you expressed your love for the Fantasy Zone titles on the Master System, particularly the first two. After some thought, you are probably right to assume that Sega would have them on this device. They were in-house developed and Opa Opa was Sega's Japanese mascot for many years. They also happen to be good games that are well identified with the Sega branding. They would also fill 2 slots for shoot 'em ups, which my list was sorely lacking. Many of you took issue with me including Deep Duck Trouble and not the Lucky Dime Caper. Honestly, they are both good games, but I much prefer Deep Duck Trouble. I think it's superior visually and it has a better variety in its stages. Lucky Dime was also a better release for the Game Gear in my opinion. There you did not lose your attack when you get hit, something that I always hated in the Master System version. Personal preference aside, I wouldn't be against its inclusion here at all. It's still a solid adventure with enough replay value that I think most folks would enjoy it. Of course, this one falls into the license debate again, so even if Sega went after a few of the great Disney releases, we are likely going to see some omissions no matter what. The Power Strike shoot 'em ups were really good on the Master System, and there were a number of comments wanting them to be included. Compile developed these, but only the first was released in North America. I fully admit these games were showpiece titles for the platform and would be killer additions. I didn't have them on my list because I really do believe Sega would not load the Master System Mini down with shooters, and they have plenty that they own themselves to represent the genre. But like a few of the other games in this episode, I'd gladly be wrong here. These games are expensive these days, so it would be an easy and effective solution to get more people to play them. There were a few people that brought up how incredible the Master System library was for gun and 3D games. Some even bemoaned the fact I didn't include any on my list. I will be straight with you here. While a Master System Mini would be a much appreciated release, I do not believe for a second that Sega would develop a modern gun to be compatible with the titles that need it. Doubly so when it comes to a modern 3D glasses solution for the games that use that. These mini consoles are built cheap and for maximum profit. Like the entire lineup of mini systems before it, the Master System Mini would be made using off-the-shelf parts and would be a simple emulation box that just happens to be officially licensed. Sega would not invest in peripherals that would add significant cost and risk to such a project. It's good to dream, but those Sega Light Phaser and 3D releases are well beyond a product of this type. I was absolutely shocked that some of you wanted Teddy Boy. It was originally a Sega card release for the Master System, based on an arcade game released in 1985. This is an extremely simple game where you blast enemies and collect stuff. Stage visuals are rudimentary, as is the music. I'm not sure if the love for this one is driven by nostalgia or if I just don't appreciate it on the same level. Either way, Sega does own this, and it would be really easy to include it. Perhaps a Sega cards section would be in order, and include a number of those releases since they were so small in size. Astro Warrior was another surprise. This simple shoot 'em up only has a few stages and is about as plain Jane as it comes when talking about the genre. It was included with many of the consoles as a pack-in, typically bundled with another game. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad by any means, but I'm not sure Sega would include it with so many other options available. There are lots of you out there that really like the Master System version of Ghouls and Ghosts. While I adore the Genesis release, I never took to this one. It does have additional content beyond the original. Arthur can be outfitted with different items that help him in his quest, an addition that many of you consider a game changer. I just never could get behind its gameplay, however. This is noticeably slower and more clunky than either the arcade or the Genesis releases. I also thought it looked and sounded bad. I don't know, this would never be on my list of first choices, and if Sega wanted to license a Capcom game, I'd much rather have Forgotten Worlds. You know, I admit that I really hadn't considered Action Fighter. This is essentially Sega's version of Spy Hunter, a top-down combat game that has you controlling multiple different kinds of vehicles. Sega owns it and it'd be an easy addition, and there isn't much like it on the platform. I must say I wouldn't fuss about it being added, so bring it on. A number of you pointed out that there were other Illusion games on the Master System that you preferred. Besides Castle of Illusion, there was also Land of Illusion and Legend of Illusion, though the latter was only released in Brazil thanks to Tectoy. All of these games were top-notch, and the more you have of them, the better. While Castle will always hold a special place in my heart, both Land and Legend would be worthy substitutes. They all play great, have some of the best visuals on the platform, and hold up extremely well. Like the Donald Duck titles, I do not believe Sega would license them all, so we likely will get just one of them at best. I'm not picky about it, and would be happy with any of these fine choices. I saw multiple requests for sports games on the Master System Mini. I admit I'd like to see some as well, but going by the Genesis Mini, I didn't think Sega would include any. They certainly have a heck of a list if they did, however. The Great series of sports games included just about everything. There was great basketball, great football, great ice hockey, great golf, so on and so forth. They're not all particularly good, but they'd be easy to add since Sega owns every one of them. Alas, Sega didn't include any on the Genesis, a platform known for its sports offerings, so there is little chance to see them here. I omitted Cloudmaster just because of the licensing thing. This was originally a Taito arcade game, a horizontal shoot 'em up with a little dude riding a cloud. It's a decent game, but I just don't think Sega would pursue the IP and pay for it. Again, they have plenty of shooters under their own branding. It does have nice visuals, supports the FM sound unit, and is quite a solid challenge. I'd take it if it was offered, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it either. I really enjoyed Ghostbusters on the Master System. It plays so different from the other games on the platform, and even though it could be crazy hard, I still dumped many hours into it. If I had my way, I would include it in a heartbeat. You have to catch Ghost, buy equipment, and defeat the evil Gozer the Gozerian before New York and ultimately the entire world is destroyed. I love the tune that plays throughout the game, and trying to fight your way through that final run was all I could think about for months. Thing is, this game would be a miracle if it turned up on the Mini. The game itself is owned by Activision, while the IP is owned by Sony Pictures. That's a lot of hoops to jump through and a lot of money to be paid in order to score this game that is quite divisive in its quality. Ghostbusters wasn't on the Genesis Mini, so I don't expect one here either. Old Bomber Raid here reminds me very much of Capcom's 1940 series of shoot 'em ups. It's vertically scrolling and has very similar art style on its planes and ships. It's a fairly solid game with lots of challenge and colorful visuals. It supports the FM sound unit, and as far as I know, Sega owns it. That makes it one that would fit well with the Mini, particularly since it was Japan's very last Mark III release. I would expect to see this before any of the Power Strike titles. After reading the many comments from the original Master System Mini episode, it made me realize that there is no way everyone is going to be happy with the final selection of games. There is always going to be something included or left out that you disagree with. I think the very best we can hope for is that the list would include enough that you at least respect it and enjoy what is offered. I think Sega would win some pretty big brownie points if they just added some options to take advantage of modern technology. Sega could move the pause button to the controller. Sega could add original and FM sound support. Sega could hide some Easter eggs in the hardware, like Snail Maze or Hang On. Hell, I'd even appreciate some SG-1000 love. There is so much in Sega's history that could be easily touched upon in a product like this. I guess the bottom line is this: Sega could make this so much more than a simple emulation box. They could make it fun with unlockables, achievements, and features that really show off just how ahead of its time the Master System was. While many see it as nothing more than Nintendo's bitch during the 8-bit era, it was so much more than that. It had a library well worth playing and a number of classics that deserve some attention from modern audiences. Hopefully, if we keep pounding that message out, someone at Sega will eventually take notice. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.